Još jedan srdačan pozdrav iz crkve u Torontu. Evo nas ponovo zajedno oko reči Božje. I za danas evo jedna nova tema. Ja bih želeo da proučavamo o jednoj ličnosti koja je živjela otprilike pre 4000 godina. Znači to uzmite negdje 2000 godina posle stvaranja. Ali kad govorimo sa biblijske tačke,
a very important biblical character who we could learn a lot from. When you take Moses, who wrote about this, Moses wrote about this thoroughly. I would like to talk about Abraham and his life. What is interesting about Abraham, when you take the three major religions in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they all put Abraham on a pedestal. He is the father of these three. With the Israelites, you can connect them as they call him the father of the nation. When you take Islam, it is said that they also say that he is the father of their faith, since Ismail is his son. So what about Christians? How is he our father? What the Apostle Paul says in many places is that we are his children, and he is the father of all those who believe. He is the father of the faith. And so if I believe in Jesus, then Abraham is my example. He is extremely important for all three religions. He is important for the whole world, and I will explain why he is so important for the whole world. When you take the Bible and you open right in the beginning, theologians will say that the first 11 chapters are prehistoric, whereas after, history starts. When you take the beginning and God is creating the world and everything was good, everything was perfect, vegetation, animals, the world itself was perfection. And then we fall into sin. Genesis 3, sin, and what we see from the 3rd chapter on, that sin spreads. Brother kills brother. And when you go a little bit further, they say that it was such a big problem in this world that people only thought about sin and only bad things. And then you have a glimmer of hope where in chapter 6, God finds Noah and his family, and they made a boat, an ark, and they save themselves in this ark as well as the animals. And then you have that moment where they get out of the ship and the boat, and they place a sacrifice before God, and the smell, they said, was good to God. But again, sin takes over, and very fast. In the 11th chapter, we see sin everywhere again. What happened in chapter 11? The Tower of Babel was built, and what did God say? He said, multiply, be fruitful, spread in the world. But they said, no, we want to be in one place so that people know us. So we will build a tower, just in case there's another flood again, so that we can escape. And God says there will not be another flood. And then again you see overall catastrophe and sin. And then again a glimmer of hope in chapter 12 when God is calling Abraham. And you know, we have a single picture so you could see. You can see now in this why chapter 12 is so important and why Abraham is so important for history. If you take the creation of the world, you see Genesis 1. What did God give people? He gave us this world. People were created. Be fruitful, multiply, and God was with them. We know that God was coming down to the Garden of Eden, where they had relationship with God. And you could see this all in the first chapter of Genesis. Genesis 3, he gave us the world. In chapter 3, you see that there's weeds and thorns being growing. And then also, he says that the woman will have pain in labor, so anguish and pain. So this was... So, and then also in 3, they are thrown out of the Garden of Eden, and their communion with God and this walking with Him daily is disconnected. In Genesis 12, God is again promising them a new earth, promising them that they will be fruitful and blessed. So chapter 12 is almost like He's giving them what was lost through sin. And then in 12, He's giving them this promise again. And in 17, Canaan, you will have kings coming out of your line, and it's as though He's saying that through Abraham, everything is starting again. Through Abraham, He is making all things fresh again. Abraham and his experience is important for the whole world. God is returning that which was lost through sin. Let's go in chapter 12. Where we read about Abraham's story. Abraham was living in Ur, which is in Iraq, and moved to Haran. And what is interesting, and Abraham got 2 calls. We don't know quite clearly why he didn't leave from Ur, but we know his father was dying in Haran. His father was old, and maybe he didn't want his father exposed to such a journey. What we know about Ur is that it's the most beautiful place that world had. The commentators would say that the houses were of stone, which was very important for that time, with many floors. Many commentators will say that they had aqueducts, water flowing. And Abraham is called to leave this place, the most beautiful place. And God says, Genesis 12, verse 1, Now Jehovah said unto Abram, Get thee out of the country, and from your kindred, and from your father's house, into the land that I will show you. These 3 things, he says, you have to do. You have to leave 3 things, but I will give you 3 things. So what did God promise him if he leaves Ur and starts his journey? In verse 2, And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abraham went, as the Lord had told him. See these 3 blessings that God offers. 3 you've left behind. 3 I'm offering to you. I will make of you a great nation. I will give you land as the first. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless. You will be a blessing, he says. Those three are the blessings promised. Let's go through these three blessings and the fulfillment of them. We can learn so much from Abraham's experience and learn a lot from his faith. So, leave your father's house, kindred, for the land I am going to give you. So God says, I will give you land. And back then, land was very important. Today, when we say land, we always ask, where is the land? If it's a great location, then awesome. But then, land, just land on its own, was very important. That's why God tells him this. Let's think about this. When he started his journey and when he reached this destination, what was waiting for him there? What was waiting there? They say flows milk and honey. Did Abraham find milk and honey when he reached the promised land? Let's remind ourselves. First, he saw that the land wasn't without people. A large group of people lived there that had their cities, that had their developed systems. And what is really interesting is that Abraham gets instruction, leave your land, and I will show you where you're going to go, and it'll be good land. And he arrives, and famine. It's such a large famine that because of the lives of his people, they have to run to Egypt just to survive. That's how big that famine was. You know, in those moments, we see how Abraham behaves in a land that isn't welcoming. When God says, go north, east, southwest, and see this land, this I will give to not to you, but to your children and your children's children. So they arrive, there's people there, there's famine, and he knows that the land will not be his, but for his children. This was plenty of reason to just U-turn it back to Ur, the most beautiful that this world can offer. And what's here? What is left for me here? The grandeur, the largeness of Abraham is found in that he didn't turn around. And we could see from his experience, when he goes to Egypt, we can see his humanity. He isn't an ideal, perfect person, but he didn't turn around. And when God says, I have to draw this out for you, when God tells him to look all around, and I'll give this to your children and children's children, it's like when you go to a store for a Mercedes, and you go to a luxury car, and the salesperson says, see how good this is? Look at the tires and the motor, the engine. Oh, see how beautiful it is? I will give you, see this? You can watch it. You can look at it from all angles, but it'll be your kids, not yours. When God tells Abraham the same for the land, many people would turn around. But Abraham didn't turn around and walk away. And that which God promised him wasn't fulfilled. Not only does he not get the land, but when you study all of this, you can see that when Sarah died, she died before Abraham, he didn't have a parcel of land in which to bury his wife. He had to buy land. You have this father, the patriarch of the faith, who left everything. a wanderer, nomad, who doesn't even have land, and he has to buy a parcel of land to bury his wife. The greatness of Abraham is that he didn't turn around and walk back. Let's go a little bit further. So land is the first promise. Second, that he will have a big nation from him. It isn't, if someone said, you're going to have 70 children, I would say 2 is enough for me. But in that time, land and a big family, many children were held highly, they were highly esteemed. So Abraham is going from Haran. Abraham knows something that, and Sarah knows something. We know something now. And what is this? She is barren. So he's starting this journey with a blessing that their family will grow, but he knows his wife is barren. And when you think about this start, when God tells him to leave his family, but he takes Lot with him, in that we almost see this, not perfection, but look at Lot. Even Lot is his security that the future generation, their family line will grow. And you know that Lot and him even separated at one point. They both became so wealthy and were so blessed by God that the land couldn't carry the both of them together. So they separated, and Abraham again is alone with Sarah, who still is barren. And then he says, he wasn't perfect. I again have to say that Abraham wasn't perfect, but he didn't turn around and leave. So let's go to Genesis 15.
Chapter 12.
15, 2, 3.
Gospode, Gospode, šta ćeš mi dati kad živim bez dece? I na kome će ostati moja kuća? To je, kaže, Eliezer.
But Abraham said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abraham said, Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. The years are passing, Sarah's getting older, Lot is gone, so I guess this servant will inherit everything, so God's promise will be fulfilled. And then God says in Genesis 15, verses 4 and 5, And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, This man shall not be your heir, your very own son shall be your heir. He says, it will start of you, but he doesn't mention Sarah. He just says, of you. And he takes him outside and said, look towards heaven and number the stars if you are able to number them. So imagine Abraham stepping out of the tent. He looks up at the stars and he says, so shall your offspring be. So here's a key text, verse 6, and he believed the Lord and he counted it to him as righteousness. So he believes in God, that he knows it won't be Lot, it won't be Eliezer, the servant, but it will be, the children will be of his body, and he believed. But again, it's interesting, Sarah isn't mentioned. So now when you take Genesis 16, he was 75 when he started the journey, so years are passing, 11 years have passed, and Sarah still hasn't had a child. The promise still stands, and then they take matters into their own hands. So Sarah has this great idea, let's take Hajar, which is our servant, and she will birth us children, and I will adopt them as my own. It was acceptable culturally with the peoples around them. So that is what they did. And this is where Ishmael was born. And because of this, let's call it a mistake, as now you know there is conflict between these two groups. But this is where they didn't follow direction. I don't know if you've ever read about Ishmael and what his name means, but it means God will hear. So when they got Ishmael, they were pleased. Here's an answer to our prayers. God heard us. God will hear us, and we have a child, and we are content. We have a plan, and it fulfilled. It was fulfilled, but God was not content. And when you think about this promise, they got Ishmael. God wasn't happy, and God said, Sarah will have a child, and that child is child of the promise. So they get this information, and that it cannot be a servant girl. And in Abraham's 100th year, they get Isaac is born. She is 90 years old, and he's 100. And Isaac is born. And Ishmael was born when Abraham was 86. Now, when you think of this promise, was it fulfilled? Many offspring. Was it fulfilled? When God says, look at the stars in the sky, that shall be your offspring. And he gets Isaac. Even Sarah gets a new name, and he gets a new name. Abraham means elevated father, but when God changed his name to Abraham, it means father of many nations. I will change your name so that you will be known as father of many nations, many peoples. A small digression, when you take Abraham, when someone asks, what is your name? And they say Abraham or Avram, father of many. But then how many children do you have? I have 2. So how are you a father of many when you have so little children for that time? So this blessing is getting fulfilled in the minimal, visibly, for Abraham to see in his life, in his old age. Sarah didn't even get to see or witness her son's marriage because she died before he married Rebecca, but Abraham witnessed it. He was 160 years old when Rebecca had 2 children. Abraham died at 175 years old, so he got to see Jacob into 15 years. He was able to see 2 grandchildren born, but that's all he saw. He didn't. The fulfillment of this promise looked different for him in that moment. So the third promise, what was it? You will be a blessing. You will be a blessing. Was Abraham a blessing to others? Was the promise typically fulfilled in his life? Remember when he went to Egypt because of famine? Was he a blessing to Pharaoh? He brought damnation to the Pharaoh. He says to Sarah, you are pretty in the face. Why don't we say that you're my sister, not my wife? And then came trouble. And again, he repeats this with Abimelech. Simply put,
nije se ispunilo ovo.
this, these things weren't fulfilled.
Ja sam sad ovo proučavajući pre neki dan malo više.
As I was reading about this and studying this more,
Čak Abram kad je krenuo, to je 20. poglavlje 13.
in chapter 20, verse 13,
planirao da će ovo reći.
he was already planning this. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, "This is the kindness you must do to me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother." So while they were planning, when they were leaving Ur, or his father's place, we're going into an unknown place, he tells her, but everywhere when people ask you who you are, tell them you're my sister. Tell them I'm your brother. He was still learning along the road. He had to learn and defragment from a lot along the way, but he never turned around and went back. You know, when he says she's his sister, it's half truth because they had different fathers. They had different mothers, but the same father, Abraham and Sarah, which the customs were different at the time. And then comes what Apostle Paul says later, talks about later, is where is the fulfillment? Where is the promise? What was the fulfillment? Where is the fulfillment? Genesis 12. Your offspring will be a blessing to many nations. And Paul says, not in seeds, but seed through one seed. And what seed is that? In the future, who will be a blessing? And that's Jesus Christ. That comes from Abraham's lineage. 2,000 years after Abraham, that was the blessing. That was a blessing his offspring were going to bring or get. Abraham, when you look from 75 to 175, people have watched him how he prayed, how he gave sacrifice. That's why the greatest blessing was the blessing in the future. So what we can learn, we see that the promises aren't fulfilled in his life, but he didn't give up or quit. Abraham believes in God even though his situation is different. That is why he's the father of the faith. And the question for us today is, do I believe in God when the situation in my life is different, when the blessings aren't being fulfilled in the way that I would like or I think they should be fulfilled? Do I believe, or do I give up and turn around and go back? Can they say about me like they did of Abraham, believed in God and was righteous, even though the circumstances and surroundings are different? When you think of us today, what are the situations or circumstances of our lives? Maybe we lost a job, lost that blessing. Maybe someone's health is waning, and maybe that situation has changed. Maybe someone is studying, and the exams are on Saturday. We could list many. What do we think should be a blessing, but it doesn't reflect in our lives? People around us are blessed. Meanwhile, financially, I have to pay rent, this and that, and our circumstances are different. And what we can learn from Abraham, which is fascinating, he doesn't want to return. He believes God and he pushes forth. even though he doesn't understand, even though the blessings aren't being fulfilled. I would like to connect. Let's go to Hebrews 11. We have a few fascinating Hebrews 11. It says, what is faith? It starts with what is faith, and this is what was fulfilled in Abraham's life. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And this is Abraham's life. He was hoping, he was hopeful for something. He doesn't want to go back. He believes in God, that it will be, and he's ready to go forward. But let's go to verse 8. His experience and story is there. Let's read from 8 till 16. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. So he's coming, and he's living in tents. He doesn't have land. He's a nomad. Why? For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Why didn't Abraham go back? Because he's waiting, he's anticipating that even though this isn't the promise, but he knows there's something greater. He's waiting for that promise. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven, and as many as the innumerable grains of the sand by seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus must make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. By faith, through your seed, everyone will be blessed. And your offspring. So it's long view. And they all were guests and visitors here. And this is just a pit stop while they travel to their end destination. That's why they never wanted to go back. That's why my call to you is, through this short reading on Abraham, that we know that the biggest blessings are just coming. And that when Jesus Christ comes, when he builds his new kingdom, that is a fulfillment. This planet, this place is not our forever home. We shouldn't pine for just these things, but what is coming. This is the experience of the patriarchs. This is the crown or the sum of it all, that they all died without receiving the promise, but living towards a future promise of what God has coming. How we live in Corona and our situations are different, worries and things are changing quickly, but let's look towards the beauty of the future of what God has promised us. Let me tell you something, a true experience. A young man and woman went out for dinner. It was her birthday. And when the young man went into the restaurant, they were supposed to have dinner. He brought with him a big box with a gift for her. And when they sat down, he said, during the dinner, don't open it, just open it after dinner. So she was sitting at this dinner table, and they're eating dinner, and she keeps looking at this box. What is in this box? This box is so huge, but what could it be? So after dinner, he said, now you can open it. And she's opening this huge box. And in the box is a pillow. She's like, there must be something else in there. So she's looking at the bottom. Maybe something's at the bottom of the pillow. It's just a pillow. She's a bit devastated. She's like, how could he give me a plain pillow for my birthday? And then the young man takes a pillow, puts it on the ground. He kneels on this pillow and asked her to marry him. And he asked her, will you be my wife? And this young woman forgot about the pillow and the useless pillow that she didn't, because her experience was so much greater. She concentrated more on the person who gave her the pillow and not so much on the pillow. When we think of Abraham and think of ourselves, let us always pay attention to the one who gave us the blessing, not the blessing itself. Many times we hear people say, you're so blessed. The thing isn't about the blessing, but about the one who is giving. So let's concentrate and put our sights on him. Amen.